All right, today we're going to be talking about alerting best practices. When DBAs and developers ask me what are the three books or the three best books to read about development, one of those books that comes up, it's really just a fable, is The Boy Who Cried Wolf. It's a very short fable. I also like to recommend The Three Little Pigs and The Tortoise and the Hare. They think I'm kidding, and I'm not. I'm like, the stories in those books, or the messages, I should say, in those fables, really, are more important, and I've seen more developers and DBAs violate them, which really creates a problem. When we talk about an alert is something that is, number one, unusual, number two, not normal, which is unusual, so same synonym there, and number three is something that we want to highly limit. Because what we want to avoid doing is training people that receiving an email in their inbox about something is no big deal, or a text message. So the first one to ask when we are thinking about designing alerts is how many possible solutions exist for the problem. Okay? Suppose you get an alert and it says something along the lines of page life expectancy is 1,000, which may be good or bad relative to your environment. Well, what are you going to do? I mean, if you can, and here's another point is, what can you actually do, right? If you can't do anything at all when you get that alert, then you have just created an alert that does you no good at all. So make sure you can do something. But if there's only one possible solution to the problem, let's give an example, is some environments, they don't customize their logs right from the beginning, and so their logs grow too much or whatnot. I'm generally a person who advocates capping log growth, and basically that forces developers to think in batches, which they need to be thinking in batches anyway. And yeah, it's an active transaction. We've all seen it in the error log. The active transaction basically fails because there's not enough log space. And I much prefer to manage that environment because you immediately get away from always maintaining log drives. But if you're not in that environment and you have to shrink the log, because that's just what happens and that's the way it's built, then if that's the only possible solution, let's say you can't automate increasing space, then go ahead and build that automated solution. Detect what you need to, and then shrink the log, okay? And that's a simple example of something. Another one is if a backup fails. Don't alert that the backup failed. Try to back up again, right? Well, it ran out of space on the drive. Okay, then that's what you want to alert on. You don't want to alert on the backup failed, right? You want to alert on why did it fail, right? It's another big difference is make sure that your alerts make sense, right? Don't just alert something that, well, now you have to go investigate why it failed, right? A good example on this is like with replication. If a log reader failed, well, I want to know why the log reader failed. I don't want to know that the log reader failed. I want to know why the log reader failed if I'm going to do an alert off of it, right? So a status is one thing, and the status is what you look at for a report, but an alert is something that needs to already go out and do that reconnaissance, right? So consider that as well. How big of an issue is the alert? If CheckDB fails, can you ignore that? No, right? That's a big issue. But here's the deal. If you can ignore an alert, then disable it, because it's completely unimportant. What you're doing is you're training yourself unintentionally to turn off the alert, right? I don't want to turn off alerts. If they're really a legitimate alert, I want to know, okay? Now there are, I understand this, exceptions where you have things that are, like for instance, ETL loads is a great example. I mean, it can happen at any time, and it can be here, and it can be here, and it can be here. What you do in that case when you're on a team is just get the team to filter those alerts into its own folder, okay? But you have to be very careful, right? Only keep alerts where you will stop everything you're doing and solve. Those are legitimate alerts. In other words, if you get at something and you're like, oh, I'll worry about that later on, that's not an alert. That's noise. You can put that somewhere in like a table and you can go read it on a report, like a health check type thing. Those are valid. But when it comes to alerts should be something that you will stop every single thing you're doing and you will go work on that. The purpose of email and text is not to create a backlog of noise. It's not. I don't have my trading robots don't send me, text messages throughout the day like, oh my gosh, oh my God. No, they send me when I want to know, right? Otherwise, what do you think is going to happen? Excuse me. I'm going to be receiving noise throughout the day, and I'm just going to get in the habit of ignoring that noise. Okay? So I understand alerting people. They get this vibe, especially with the mainstream media as well, because the mainstream media love to write disruptive stories because they're trying to generate page clicks. But that's not the purpose of alerts. An alert is something that you would stop every single thing you're doing and work on it. And if it doesn't fill that description, then apply a filter, build a health check. Health checks are much better in general for those things, where you're going to go and look at a status and then later on solve that problem.